Angenette Levy from Law on Crime. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me in regards to this trial. And just give us a quick background on what you do at Law on Crime.
Well, at Law and Crime, I report on trials and other crime news stories. I co-host a podcast, Law and Crime Sidebar. I pop up hosting every now and then. I love doing our Q&A shows. So that's just a little bit of what I do.
I wanted to talk to you today because you guys were one of the essential channels that were covering the trial back in 2022 at Fairfax. There was a lot of discourse in regards to cameras in court. And how did you guys actually manage to get in access to provide day-to-day coverage?
Well, Judge Ascarati, on her own motion, said that she would broadcast this case. You have to recall that when this case really got into full swing, at least in Virginia, COVID, we were in the middle of a pandemic. So it's not like they wanted people flocking from all over to pack into this courtroom to watch this trial. So how else are you going to allow a broad audience to view this and witness it? Because the UK trial wasn't broadcast. You had to rely strictly on print news coverage for any accounts of the case. So I think once we saw the level of interest, Johnny Depp, yes, he's a famous guy. Of course, he has legions of fans, whatever. But was the interest, I kind of thought to myself, are people really that interested in this? Will people be that interested in this? And they were. They were very interested. They tuned in every day. They tuned in early and waited for the stream to start. And I think it was a really important case because it says a lot about the world in which we live in right now. Think about it. Somebody makes an allegation, it's printed, and it's taken as fact. Whereas I think that in most respects, in all respects, really, if an allegation is made, there needs to be an investigation. And you have to be really careful with what you report. You have to get both sides of the story and be fair about it. So I think this was really important because it allowed people to see everything that was going on inside the courtroom. They could watch the entire thing. And they weren't just getting, a news story here or a television news package there.
We will definitely get into the reporting in a bit. I didn't really know the process. Do you guys normally make motions to the court to have cameras present anyway?
Well, it depends on the state you're in the United States. So some states just automatically allow a camera to come in, and it's very rare that it's not allowed. Obviously there are some times where you're not filming every moment of something. Say it's, a case involving juveniles or something like that. It just depends on the rules of each state. And typically we would go to a court and say, hey, we're interested in broadcasting this trial. This is what we'd like to do. What are the rules? We have to comply with all the local court rules regarding cameras in the courtroom. But, in everything I read, it looked like Judge Ascarati kind of made this decision on her own. Johnny Depp supported it and was fine with it, deferred to the court's judgment on this. But Amber Heard's side, from the filings I read, didn't want cameras in the courtroom.
Oh, okay, that's fair. I mean, speaking of Johnny Depp, you're not a super fan, so you're not super fan. Okay,
no, and in fact, I think it's really funny. I really think it's hysterical because I will tell you, and I think I've said this on the air, the last Johnny Depp film I saw before this trial started was Donnie Brasco in 1997 in the theaters. So I remember the first day of the trial, maybe it was like the second day, I don't remember, whatever, the first week of the trial, I was up there and somebody he knew was up there, and I asked a question about Pirates of the Caribbean, and I said, that was in whatever year, right? It happened in that first movie was in that year, right? Because I was taking notes. And we weren't allowed to have phones in the courtroom. And the person said, "You've never seen Pirates?" And I said, "No." I was like,
I
was like, "No, I've never seen it." I said, "I've never seen it." I said, "What year was it again?" And I think he said 2008 or something like that. And I said, "Look, I was busy. I work. I had never seen these Pirates of the Caribbean movies. When I showed up the first day and I saw the people with the flags out in front of the courthouse, I was just like, wow, this is really something.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm just here covering this case. And what I found amusing too is just the fact that I couldn't believe the number of people that brought their children there, given the subject matter of the case.
Yeah.
It's very serious subject matter.
Yeah, there was even a situation where someone had to be taken out of the courtroom because they were saying that the baby belonged to Depp. But anyway.
Yeah, we interviewed that lady too.
Yeah.
Frankly, before this trial, I mean, I had heard, it's like I remembered hearing snippets of these, recorded conversations, and I knew that Johnny Depp was married to a younger woman and it didn't work out. I mean, I didn't even know her name. So I just was like, it wasn't really on my radar. When this whole trial was going on in the UK, I was working in local news covering the pandemic and the 2020 election and, whatever else was going on in the world. So this was really not something that, it just wasn't really on my radar. Didn't have my attention. And then I was assigned to this, and then I, as I do any other case, I try to learn every little detail, because that's what I was taught to do when I first started working in news. Like, don't ever be caught not having all your facts. And then, if you don't know, you just say you don't know. You'll try to find out later.
Understood. So, sidebarring for a bit. So, did you read the UK judgment and all of that? Like, did you see?
I did, and I was kind of like, wow. So the guy lost the case over there. The judge over there thought he did it. So he's coming over here, and I just thought to myself, why on earth, if you lost that and people are saying, this judge is saying he thinks it's substantially true, that's a lot to then come over here and say, let's do it all over again. So it kind of made me wonder, like, is there something to this? Because I didn't really have an opinion on it when I went into covering it. I was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to go in and see what I see.
Okay, that's fair. So how do you usually approach trial reporting? Because I must imagine that it's possibly the most difficult job to have, because you have to be, as you said, you have to be really prepared, know a lot of details and about the case that you're covering. Like, how do you usually approach that without bias and a reasonable level of objectivity?
Well, I just read everything beforehand. You read all of the court documents you can get your hands on. I've been covering trials for a really long time, just getting it all right. And I like to be able to explain it to the viewers so they can understand, because I think court is very difficult for a lot of people to understand if they've A, never been to court, and B, haven't been working in a field where they're exposed to it.
And what do you want to do, Angenette?
Magazine writing.
Magazine, feature stuff, editorial kind of thing?
Features and news.
What kind of magazine would you like to work for?
Probably my dream job would be to work for Rolling Stone.
No, this ain't rehearsal.
Okay, sorry. Give me one of your song titles.
Well, now I don't. All right. Okay. See, that's. You make a very good investigative journalist, because she's figured out a way to get. Okay, well.
Yes, yeah.
I'm gonna allow that question.
As I started researching the case, I saw some of the reporting, and there were sometimes I would watch coverage of it in the morning as I was getting ready to go to the courthouse, and I would sometimes think, wow, that's not the way I would have framed that. That's not how I saw it in court. When somebody says something and it's cast in one way, it's all in framing and how you explain it, but it's also very difficult. It's very difficult to take 8 hours of material or 5 hours of material and chop it down to, a minute and 20 seconds. I go into court and I tell the viewers what I'm seeing and what I think it means. And that's just the way I do it. But I do like reading other people's stuff, because sometimes they might pick up on something you don't. But I do feel that some of the reporting that I saw, I wondered if some of the people were sitting in there watching it the entire time, or if they were watching the stream the entire day, because some of it I felt it just wasn't the way I saw it, some of it, and as I said, I went into this trial with this case not being on my radar. And I almost thought that was a good thing because I didn't have a preconceived notion about what this was going to be.
You did say something really interesting right there, which was that it was different from what you saw during the trial.
Sometimes it was like I would have to really think about it to show you examples.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd really have to think back. I mean, there's one in particular I can think of. I won't name the network, where I watched the piece. You know, it's just a news package, and I thought to myself, "Wow, so you really, you know, took that one phrase and you took it differently than I did."
Yeah.
When you know, Depp answered the question.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about like burning Amber, like I saw those texts and I was like, okay, I get he's joking with his friend. And I think some people took that literally. I never felt that. I mean, I thought they were bad. I was just like, God, if somebody talked about me like that, I'd be kind of annoyed by it. But at the same time, you know, I didn't think it was a good thing. I did not think that, but did I literally think they wanted to burn her? No, I did not. So that was one thing where I was like, wow, like some people have different senses of humor, and you know, irony is lost on some people. And I'm not telling you I thought it was a good thing, but that was one instance in which I thought to myself, yeah, he should be embarrassed by that. Like, but I guess they were talking about this Monty Python movie or whatever. Doesn't excuse it, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, context is everything, and anything taken in isolation can make you look like the worst person on God's green earth. So, I guess there has to be some level of responsibility in my opinion, saying that.
Guy certainly talks. I mean, you won't see texts like that on my phone, but I'm also not like a 50-year-old man, so in the middle of a bad marriage.
No, I completely understand. So have you seen the press coverage in regards to Amber Heard post-trial, like when all of this was done? Did you see any the press coverage on her?
I did. I think I watched the Dateline show.
Okay.
So I watched that, and I think I even tweeted about it. I saw something in the New York Times. I think the columnist was interviewed in that Dateline show. So, you know, people saying this was like watching, you know, the Roman Colosseum. It was like watching something, this treatment of her and stuff like that. Yeah. So, I mean, people are entitled to their opinions. It's interesting to me, given the verdict, that some of the coverage seems to, you know, some of the reporting seems to think that like this was a grave miscarriage of justice. And the jury watched the evidence, okay? They heard from both parties in the case. And I don't know how much more you need, because they were both able to answer questions and tell their respective stories.
Absolutely.
There were things in that trial that made both of them look terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, there were unflattering things, warts and all, that came out in this case. The juror was quoted as saying he felt they were abusive to one another, but that Amber Heard was the instigator of this stuff. Like, she was the aggressor.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can see how they reached that conclusion, because, you know, she's admitting to throwing pots and pans. She's admitting to, you know, hitting him, not punching him, but hitting him and stuff like that. And I was listening to that stuff. I mean, there were some times I were listening to these recordings during the trial, and I just thought to myself, this is so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one in particular I remember listening to, and I thought to myself, this is like gut-wrenching to listen to this.
Yeah. And
I don't see how, I don't know, maybe it's just because I've covered a lot of cases. I've covered domestic violence. You know, as a reporter, I you know, women can be abusive too. And I'm not taking up for either one of them, but let's not ignore what we heard on the tapes.
I completely understand where you're coming from, as someone who has painstakingly listened to those tapes hours on end, all of them. But you did mention your experience in covering trials and the fact that you've also covered domestic violence trials. How long have you been reporting for? If you don't mind me asking.
I mean, I've worked in news since August of. Do I really have to say? No, I'm just kidding. I've been working in news for about 21 years now, or around 21 years.
Don't look it, by the way.
On-air reporter.
Just saying, you don't look it, by the way. You don't
Well,
look like
thank
you've been
you.
working
Appreciate
21
that.
years.
Yeah, the moisturizer must be working.
Oh, the
I
skincare
always
routine.
make that joke. But yeah, I mean, I've been an on-air television reporter for almost 20 years. And so I've covered homicides that were the result of domestic violence. I've done stories on domestic violence. I think I have a different experience that I bring to the table when covering things like this, because I've seen instances in covering them. I've, thank God, never been the victim of domestic violence, but I've known people who have been, and I've known men who've been the victims of domestic violence. So I know that men can be victims of domestic violence. I also know that women can be as well, and I think more often than not, the women are, but men can still be the victims of it, and it can be physical, and it can be emotional and mental abuse. So it comes in all forms. And then you have people who argue that, well, the male is inherently the more powerful one, so the women, I've heard people say the woman can't be the aggressor. And then you mix in the Me Too movement into the whole thing, which I think there are some really good things about the Me Too movement. But like anything, things can go too far in one direction.
No, I completely understand. And we'll dig into that in quite a bit. But I do want to ask the question, in all your time of covering cases, with the cameras being brought in, there was quite a few journalists who were bemoaning that it was a mistake to let YouTubers and TikTokers, etc., to have access to watching the case and covering the case. Covering the case, and pretty much it should have been left to the control of journalists. That Judge Ascarate was, should bear responsibility for this, because journalism plays a massive role. I'm loosely quoting somebody here. What do you think of this being streamed rather than journalists controlling the communications?
Courts in the United States are public. And when cameras are allowed into a courtroom and a live stream is allowed, I mean, this is the world in which we live now. And I think that it's actually a good thing that viewers can log on. When they log on to our feed, we provide commentary, but we also provide the raw feed so that the public can see for themselves what is going on. They don't have to just rely on a news story or what have you. So they can log on and watch the entire day uninterrupted, unfiltered, and almost be a juror themselves, even though they're not.
Yeah, the 13
So
juror.
I don't think TikTok is here, whether you like it or not, it's here. The internet is here. The internet has changed everything. YouTube is here. It doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. So if people, the law tubers and whomever are watching this and commenting on it, and people want to hear their commentary, then this is a free country. This is how we do things here. We don't have closed trials in the United States. We don't close down courtrooms in the United States unless it's for a juvenile or some proceeding involving a juvenile. Around the world, we've evolved. We've gone into new realms with the internet and things like that, and it's not going to change. So I would rather have more than less.
Is there a way to control against misinformation? Because that was really parroted a lot. That a lot of misinformation came out from the trial. I mean, they haven't cited. I mean, the articles that I've read and my research in this, I haven't seen any citation of a misinformation that was actually brought out. But let's entertain it for a second. Is there a way to actually mitigate and try and control when a case has been streamed live to try and still give journalists a bit of, a way to control the conversation rather than, let anyone cover the case. I hope you know what I'm trying to ask. Do you understand what I mean?
I think I do. Like that you're thinking, like, are you saying like TikTokers shouldn't be able to take stuff off of the feed?
I'm trying to like marry the two concepts that I basically saw here, which is basically, yeah, a camera can stream it, but it can only stream from probably one source. And from that one source, they have copyright. So they could probably take down other sources that try to stream as well and replicate the stream. So that one source would be the reporting, and everything will come through that one source. You can still see it yourself, but the people commenting, etc., would be your journalists or your experts, or
Well, a lot of people think that, but then some people might like the way I report something, but might like the way another person does it better. And I think the internet's just kind of opened this whole different area where, they call them citizen journalists or what have you. Yeah. And journalism is supposed to be like, okay, here's what I see. This is what this person says. This is what this person says. And you let the public make up their mind about it. And if I find something that appears to not be true, I have a duty to point it out and highlight it for the viewer. And I just think that there's really not a way to keep other people from commenting, and just having, well, we're going to only have credentialed media only reporting on this. I mean, there's just no way to do that.
No, I tried. I try to hear every side of the argument, and sometimes it's just, to me, it was unrealistic. It's either you have cameras or you don't have cameras. But but
yeah, and I think shutting it down is the wrong thing to do. I mean, I always point to the Chauvin trial, with the George Floyd case in Minnesota. Horrible thing. Like, cities are burning across the country because of what happened to this man. Yeah. And they don't allow cameras in Minnesota, but in that case they did. Judge Cahill said, you know what, we're in the middle of a pandemic. This case is a big deal. And so he allowed cameras in. It was an exception. That was
big.
I just think that, I think, I'm a big advocate of cameras in the courtroom, and we're just at a point in time in this world where we can't just say, well, only credentialed media can report on things. There's just too much. I mean, there's too much access out there. And when I say too much, I don't mean too much like I'm complaining. I'm just saying you can't really control it.
Yeah, I understand. Switching gears a little bit and going back to your experience, have you ever covered a case where there has been a false accuser of domestic violence or abuse or, sexual violence, anything of that ilk? Have you ever covered such cases?
I've covered cases where people filed false police reports, of course, or made something up. I would really have to think about it, about whether or not I've covered a trial. I don't know if anything ever got to trial where somebody made it up. I mean, I've covered cases where, of sexual assault where, the defendant said the other person made it up and the person was acquitted. I have covered those cases, but I'd really have to think about it. I don't know if I have covered one specifically relating to domestic violence where the allegations were.
A lot of people look at this case, and this is why I kind of asked that question the way I did, because a lot of people look at this case and they make it about it being women always falsely accused or false accusations are prevalent, when I think, in my opinion, it's not that high or breaking any kind of barrier or records or anything like that. It just doesn't seem like it's. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Or
you're saying it doesn't seem like
it's a pandemic or an endemic or something that happens.
Pandemic of women making things up.
Yeah.
Like you're saying you don't believe that exists.
No, I believe women do falsely accuse. I believe men also do falsely accuse, because I mean,
go to divorce court, read through divorce filings, and you'll see all kinds of mudslung where people say one side's making something up against the other. But as far as what I cover, I don't know that I've seen something where somebody blatantly made something up.
Switching gears a little bit, and you can tell me this. It's okay. I will not judge you. I want to know, what do you think the main reason Amber lost this case ever so badly?
Well, I think that there were parts of her testimony that maybe the jury didn't believe. And it seemed like she was able to move from one kind of emotional state to another quite quickly. And I'm not sure the jury believed that. So I think that was part of it. I also think it was just a combination of things. I think Morgan Tremaine's testimony and rebuttal, basically saying, yeah, I was told which part of her face to photograph. The video that was sent into TMZ that he talked about, the kitchen cabinet video.
Absolutely.
Where I guess part of it he said the part that he received was different from what was shown during the trial, in that it was, part was cut off or what have you. So I think it was just, I think slowly but surely things just kind of built up. And at the end of his case, of Depp's case, it seemed like they had presented a strong argument that he was not the abuser that she claimed him to be. And I think that, she had filed a counterclaim, obviously, and won one of her 3 claims for the words of Adam Waldman. Mm-hmm. I think the jury found him more believable than her. And it just seemed like there were just things that, I'm thinking back to the rebuttal case. I mean, the Kate Moss thing. I mean, the Kate Moss thing was pretty stunning because she's talking about this rumor from the 90s or whatever that he threw her down the steps. And then you have Kate Moss coming in saying, no, he never hurt me, never threw me down the steps. And this is somebody who dated him for quite some time. And they partied quite a bit. I mean, that was their reputation. So I think it was just a number of things that led to her losing this case.
No, so sorry. No, I completely understand where you're coming from. I mean, the moment she lost me was when she tried to convince me that 2 of the same pictures were different, like taken in different lights. So I could not believe that could happen on national TV. That someone is trying to convince me that the natural light and the vanity light was the reason that they came out. I'm sorry. They came out looking different. Where did she lose you?
I felt like that San Francisco video, or I'm sorry, San Francisco hotel room phone call did not help her at all.
Oh, the one where Depp said that you clocked me, and then
you'll never see my eyes again. Or something to that effect. And
so you were pretty much active and was at Fairfax courthouse. You must have some water cooler stories that from the trial that you can share with us.
It was funny that I was accused of going to a victory party on Twitter, some type of like after party after the closing arguments. That really got me. That gave me a really good laugh. The Twitter stuff is pretty crazy.
Wait, who said that?
I don't know. Somebody said I was at Johnny Depp's after party or something after this closing arguments, and I was like, I was? Don't remember that, but just stuff like this. I would get these nasty tweets, and I'm just like, who are these people? Where are they coming up with this stuff? Yeah. It's nuts. I do have to get off here. I'm so sorry. I wish I could spend more time with you, but it's been lovely. I've always wanted to talk with you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can do it again sometime.
We definitely do. And thank you so much for sitting down with me and give me some of your time.
All right. I'll hit you up.